Hello and good morning, everyone. It's Jason from A2K. And thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Fusion 360, Automate to Reduce Delivery Time. Applications Engineer John Pritchard will be presenting for us today. So before we start, we'll just go through about A2K. We're all about fostering innovation, consulting and training. A2K Technologies plays a vital role in helping infrastructure, building, mining, construction, architecture, and manufacturing industries reach their full potential by delivering complete technology solutions and support services such as education and consulting. We work in visionaries to shape the future of design, and in turn enable them through innovation to minimize risks, improve productivities, and achieve excellence. A2K Technologies is considered the business partner of choice and trusted advisor by vendors and clients. We partner with major software and hardware vendors to meet our clients' technology needs. We strive to exceed client expectations by pinpointing their challenges and delivering solutions through experience and innovation. We work with clients and companies that are in size nationally and abroad. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Dexter, and good morning, everyone. Just a quick sound check there, Dexter, and making sure everybody can see my screen okay.
All good.
All good. Good. And yeah, thanks again, Dexter, for that introduction, and welcome along, everyone. My name is John Pritchard, as Dexter's already mentioned there, and I'm a tech support engineer with A2K Technologies. I'm a certified Autodesk trainer and tech support person. I spend a fair portion of my day doing this sort of webinar and also training a number of the mechanical suite of products that Autodesk have provided to the marketplace. So today's webinar, as Dexter's already mentioned there, is around the subject of Fusion 360, Automate to reduce delivery time. And it's great to have you along, so thanks for tuning in for today's webinar, and yeah, we look forward to spending some time around that particular topic. So just a couple of other things about me. I've been working in this industry for about 15 years or so now. Prior to that, I was in the manufacturing industry, so I actually did an apprenticeship as a fitter machinist many years ago, and worked in manufacturing industries for about 10 years also. In various aspects of manufacturing, I spent some time in CNC programming, setting, and manufacturing components. I worked in hydraulics and pneumatics and machine tool design. And yeah, as I mentioned, for the last 14 or 15 years, I've been working with the Autodesk line of products. And more recently, I've spent a little bit of time around the additive manufacturing section of industry for 3D printing. Particularly interested in the products that are available for 3D printing componentry suitable for manufacture. So that's just a little bit about me. And as I mentioned, today's topic is really around one of the more recent applications that Autodesk have developed, I guess. As you're probably aware, Autodesk have quite a large suite of products that they supply for various disciplines. So obviously we've got aspects of the software for that they provide for yeah, my space is mainly in the manufacturing side of things, but certainly we run other webinars and training on architectural type products. We run training on civil engineering software and a number of other disciplines as well. So electrical, yeah, mainly architectural for the Revit people as well. So if you're in that space, don't hesitate to get in touch. We certainly run many training options for, and these type of webinars on many of those elements of engineering software. But as I mentioned, today's webinar is really focused around one of those little tools that Autodesk have had in the marketplace for some time, Fusion 360. As I said, it's perhaps one of the more recently developed tools in that it was developed largely in the late 1990s, and obviously still being developed through into the 21st century, which is great. But what that really means for us is that the developers been able to readily leverage things like high-speed internet, cloud data storage, to make Fusion a really powerful collaboration tool. And it offers today's designers and engineers a very powerful set of CAD tools, but also we've got CAM tools associated with that. So if you're doing some CNC machining or something of that nature, we can certainly do that as well. And also CAE for doing stress analysis or computer like FEA type studies and things of that nature within your designs. Certainly current trends and global supply challenges with the recent COVID side of things have forced manufacturers to rethink the way that they design and use their systems. Today, we're seeing the need for much more agile type systems. So we're finding a lot of pressure on engineers and designers to adapt quickly to constant change and being able to drive that change into their modelling process. So really one of the biggest changes we've seen in the past decade is just is really the amount of data that we create and consume, especially in design and manufacturing. So we find many challenges for people trying to manage that data. And that's where collaboration within a cloud type situation is so beneficial. Obviously, this is not a specifically new thing, but certainly, well, most of us use net banking and some of those sorts of tools, which are basically cloud computing also. So this, I guess, is the aspect of cloud computing for manufacturing. So Fusion 360 itself is a very powerful and collaborative tool that's built on many of the cloud type systems that Autodesk have been building over the last decade or so. So we see lots of different tools available to us, and it's a pleasure to be able to explore some of those with you today. So we have done many other Fusion and many other webinars on the Fusion interface as well. So over the last 18 months or so, we've, perhaps even longer than that, we've been doing webinars on these sorts of subjects. And but really just to focus in a little more on the Fusion system, you may have come across other Autodesk tools that have this 360 in their name. You might have heard of BIM 360 or Drive 360 or even AutoCAD 360. Basically, these are cloud apps that are available to us to manage data. As I mentioned, we've got a version of AutoCAD that can now run in the cloud. So Autodesk over the last 10 years or so have been really pushing forward with this concept of cloud computing. So not only are we using applications in the cloud, but we're also using Autodesk server banks to do heavy processing for us. So things like rendering and some animation studies and stress analysis studies and things like that are now uploaded to the cloud and run on a server bank in the cloud, and then the basically the results of that study come down roughly in about 1/10 of the time that it would take your local machine, again, depending on what sort of PC you've got. But yeah, so if you were to upload an FEA study, for instance, to the cloud, basically in 1/10 of the time it would take your machine to process that FEA study, you would get the results back from the Autodesk system. And they have a system of cloud credits where we can utilize that. So that's been in function for a number of years now. That's certainly not a new technology, but it's a very powerful technology that just gives users that edge to be able to deliver products and items in a much quicker time frame than sort of having to set your system going overnight and run your FEA study or whatever it might be that you're choosing to do there. So Autodesk have been forging ahead with a lot of this functionality over the years, and we've certainly seen some very large steps taken in that space in the whole cloud side of things. So certainly worth looking into if you haven't already. Obviously, there are some companies that are security conscious with regard to this, but like I said, we've all been doing net banking for many years, so we trust our finances in the cloud. So really, engineering data is quite a trustworthy system. Autodesk do tick a number of boxes for military spec and things like that. So we are seeing a lot of things moving that way towards this cloud collaboration process. The big thing, or the big difference with Fusion, is that it's not so much of a cloud-dependent application. It utilizes the cloud, but we still install an application onto our local machine. So we do have a piece of software running on our local machine, but it interacts with cloud storage by default. You can obviously save files to your local machine still. There's no problem with doing that. So if you do have challenges with security or your company doesn't allow saving files to the cloud, we can operate purely in a non-cloud-based environment and still save our files back to our local machine. So what is Fusion? Well, like I said, it is a CAD tool. It's a CAD system, but it's much more than that, in that it includes a CAM workspace, it's got a rendering workspace, it's got a simulation workspace. Like I said, generating CNC toolpathing is quite a common thing that people are using Fusion for these days, and has a very, very nice little interface for doing that. So in previous webinars, we've talked about many of those other aspects of Fusion, and we've covered introduction to Fusion. We've covered quite a range of other topics, and look, more than happy to link some of those in the chat after this webinar's finished. I'll perhaps pop some links in there to help you if you'd like to, if you're just beginning your journey with Fusion. So you might find some of that information valuable also. But today's topic is really more focused around the concept of being able to automate and process some of those perhaps more tedious tasks inside of Fusion more efficiently and more quickly without having to spend countless hours doing laborious processes. So what we want to do today is just briefly look at some of the various functionalities that we've got that Autodesk have developed for allowing us to work with that. I guess Autodesk are one of those companies that are always pursuing continuous improvement, and we talk quite a lot about a number of those lean processes, I suppose, that we might discuss with regard to how software is being created these days and how we can go ahead and make use of many of those other options. So just with regard to some of those other webinars, as I mentioned, we have done many webinars, and if you're interested in those, we can certainly send you the links, not only on Fusion, but also the Inventor software. Like I said, we do a lot of these webinars as well that relate to AutoCAD or to Revit or many of the other software systems that Autodesk have created. So feel free to get in touch with us and send us a message or whatever, and we can certainly send you the links to all of those webinars if that's of interest to you. So we have done quite a few on the Fusion space. I think I've done half a dozen or more on the Fusion space itself, so something to consider. But like I said, today we'd like to talk a little bit more about the automation process. And for those of you that have been in the CAD world for some time, and most of us have probably heard of AutoCAD at least, if not used it to some degree. AutoCAD is one of those tools, and it was Autodesk's sort of flagship product from 50 odd years ago, but still widely used in many disciplines throughout, not only manufacturing, but yeah, civil engineering. It's used for architectural, it's used in all sorts of types of disciplines. So as I mentioned before, electrical, we've got many other systems that utilize the AutoCAD interface. So if you've ever come across AutoCAD, you might have heard of what we call Lisp routines, which are run within the AutoCAD interface to effectively make some of those laborious tasks happen quicker and to speed things up when we talk about working with our particular software. And Fusion is not unlike that, in the sense that within the Fusion space, we've got what we call an Addins area, where we can, and I'll switch over and do a quick demo on this in a while, where we can go in and build scripts to do certain functions that obviously save us having to do any of those real laborious tasks or those repetitive things. So yeah, basically with regard to working within the Fusion interface, we've got the option to either create routines in C++. So for those of you that have been working with various aspects of code over the years, you'd be familiar with the C++ language, which has been around for some time now. It's quite a complex language. It's one of the languages that's used to write various codes and various elements of software. The other really good thing about Fusion, though, is that it also applies the Python language, which many of you may have come across if you've ever written any scripts or routines of late. Certainly Python is the the more preferred option. It's a little bit simpler to learn. It's quite a sort of I guess a bit of a newer method of working with that. It's certainly a lot quicker and easier uptake than perhaps learning something like C++, and very widely used amongst many engineers and people that are code cutting. So let's swing over now. I'd like to just pull up my Fusion screen and give you a bit of a demonstration on what we can do and some of the different tools for working with that. So for those of you that haven't seen the Fusion interface, and hopefully you're a little bit aware of that, like I said, I'd encourage you to go and watch some of our other webinars. We have done webinars on various aspects of these different environments. So the design environment, generative design, we've done a webinar on generative design as well, where we talk about doing some studies on our traditional sort of methods of design and how we might work with that. We haven't done one on rendering yet, but that's something that we might do in the future. Animation, so we can explode an assembly apart in the animation environment within Fusion. We've also got the option here for simulation studies. As I mentioned, we can go and do some stress analysis and do some stress testing, etc., inside the system. And as I mentioned, lastly, down here, we've got the, sorry, not lastly, but the second to bottom option there is manufacture, where we've got the option to go in and do some tool pathing for a CAM system. So that's another aspect of Fusion that you might like to consider. And one of the other areas that the last option down there is for drawings, where we can go and create a drawing from our current design or from an animation as such. So like I said, we have done numerous other discussions on various aspects of the Fusion interface, and hopefully those of you that have seen those already have found them beneficial, but I will perhaps link some of those into the chat at the end of today's session. And maybe you can share those with you as well. But like I said, the real focus for today is looking at what we call these add-ins. Like I said, the add-ins aspect of the Fusion space is quite powerful. There's a lot of things that we can do in here, and the purpose of today isn't really to go and write code or anything, but just to give you a bit of an insight into how you might get involved in this and some of the other aspects of that. Now, obviously, we've got an app store for Fusion, and I might actually just quickly pull that up. So the app store itself is quite a useful tool for us, and you'll find here, here's the App Store, one of the apps that's available to us. So I'll just jump back, I was in here earlier. So here's the App Store for the Fusion interface. Again, you'll find these are being added frequently, and people obviously write various codes for that, and we can go and download any of these particular functionalities. One that I downloaded just earlier today was this curve divisor. So some of you would be familiar with the old AutoCAD break command, where we can do a series of points along a line. Fusion itself doesn't have that function. However, we can go and grab this little application here that's been written by a Fusion user, and we can add that into our add-ins. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown on that later on. So really worth having a look here at the various aspects of the Fusion interface. Like I said, you'll find all sorts of different apps for different areas of the Fusion space. If you search through here, you'll find many applications that have been written and added by people out in the community to allow us to work with different aspects of Fusion. So really worth having a look there at the Fusion interface. So as I mentioned, under the add-ins area, if we jump in here to the App Store, that's what you'll find there. But if we go to scripts and add-ins, we get a little dialog pop up like this, where we can basically see some currently available scripts. So Autodesk have added a few scripts in here. As you can see, most of them written in the Python environment. And look, some of these are quite good just to explore and have a look at what's available, and certainly breaking some of these down would be a way of having a look at how we might go about creating our own add-ins for Fusion to make it function a little more appropriately for us. But yeah, for instance, if we were just to go and grab this script called bottle and select it and then run that script, basically, some person has kindly created a little 3D bottle for us. So here's an example of what you might create with a script. So rather than having to go and create all of these features, so as you can see down here, we've got the timeline in Fusion that shows us how this part evolved. So whoever it was that created this particular part created a revolved shape. They then added a shell to that, so they opened it up or hollowed that particular bottle part out. Further to that, we've got they've added a thread to the neck of the bottle here, and so on and so forth. So effectively, that's how this bottle was created. But like I said, I was just able to create that in a matter of seconds because we just simply ran that script to create the bottle. All right, and it's certainly worth having a look at these guys. These are very simple to run. Normally, we just select the option and then pick the run option down here, and Fusion will go off and build that particular feature for us. Okay. Now, maybe what I'll do, I'll just back out of that and show you one of the others that's available to us here. So again, under scripts, if we were to pick up, for instance, this spur gear. So we've got a couple of options down here. We've got a spur gear here. If I was to click run, basically Fusion presents us a dialog where we can enter the parameters. So how many teeth do we want in our spur gear, et cetera, et cetera. So we can pop in whatever we would like there, the pressure angle, for those of you that are familiar with how gears are generated, the diametral pitch and all that sort of good information that we can set up here in the table. When we click OK, Fusion goes off and creates a spur gear for us with the requested number of teeth in that particular spur. Okay, so they're quite powerful little tools. Like I said, to go and model that manually, I would expect that you have to go and draw the tooth profile and get your correct geometry, then you pattern that around a circle. But obviously, under the add-ins area here, we've got these options available to us. Now we can quite simply create our own, and when we jump in here to create, again, you'll get an option to either create that in the C++ language or in the Python language. Okay, we can go through, give it a name, and then simply create our code down here and go off and build that particular item. So really creating these guys is it's not rocket science, it's just a matter of following a process. And certainly with this Python language, like I said, quite simple to learn. The uptake for that one is very, very short. It's a very short learning curve, if you like, that we can go through and work with that. So really the whole concept of running these scripts or add-ins in the background of Fusion just allows us to cut out some of those laborious tasks. So for instance, if you traditionally start your modeling process, let's say you're a product developer, and a lot of your items are built around, for instance, some sort of conveyor system. You could create a little script here that created a conveyor, and then effectively we can create variations within that design. So when we create a conveyor, maybe we've got various lengths and widths for the conveyor system, and maybe speeds at which that travels at, or a whole bunch of different options are available to us when we go into creating the code there that would allow us to work with the Fusion interface. So I guess the long and the short of this, guys, and look, like I said, it wasn't our purpose today to run through the whole process of this, but just to give you a bit of an idea as to how we can run some of these scripts and add-ins and utilize them. Like I said, the great thing about Python is you'll find there's a lot of already created content on the World Wide Web, so certainly worth searching around first up before you go and create something, because you may find somebody else has happily created that and is willing to share it with you. So look, lots of different options there for working with these scripts and add-ins. I'd encourage you to have a look at this. Like I said, it's not rocket science, but certainly a very clever functionality, especially if you've had a bit of exposure already to either C++, which, like I said, is a more traditional, slightly older system of creating code, but certainly now with the fact that we can use the Python language, yeah, we've got a lot more versatility, and look, a lot of students that are in college learn how to write code in Python. It's very, very common and quite a standard system, I suppose, that's now being used globally for a lot of these sort of functionalities. So yeah, many options there for working with that. Basically, these scripts or add-ins get saved to your local drive that we can go in and work with that. So I mentioned before this one that I downloaded from the net called this curve divisor. And effectively what we can do with this one, and again, I'll just back out of the spur gear. If I was to create a new sketch, and let's say I just wanted to do a sketch on this plane, and we'll just draw a quick spline line. Okay. Now, like I said, in AutoCAD, most of you would be familiar with the break at point and the divide command, where we can add a series of points. Sadly, Fusion doesn't have this in its standard interface, but what you will notice, once we run that add-in called curve divisor, which is what I picked up from the App Store that I showed you earlier, under here, I've run that already on my system. So you'll notice that when I go to add-ins, I've got the curve divisor is loaded now, and it's ready to be able to use. But effectively, all we need to do now, once we go to use that, is we can simply go in here to the sketch environment and pick the curve divisor option. And effectively, we pick the spline and then tell it how many points we want along the spline, for instance. And what Fusion obviously does, or this piece of code does, is simply divides up the length of the spline into 6 equal lengths, if you like. And we've now got that divided. So again, just as a bit of an example, I suppose, of one that most of us would be familiar with if ever we used AutoCAD, is to be able to put points along a curve at a set increment. So yeah, that's just one little example of one of the add-ins that's available to us from the App Store. Okay, so really, I guess, like I said, the purpose of today was just to explore and give you a bit of insight into how we can work with these scripts and add-ins and how we can use that. And look, what I'd like to do just in closing is mention one other gentleman that has done quite a lot of work on this by the name of Patrick Rainsbury. And what I will do, I'll pop a link to his training. He goes through some other elements of working with Fusion and its add-ins, and sort of steps through the process of creating a basic code, if you like, or a basic piece of code you might like to explore and have a look at that. So I would just like to acknowledge Patrick as a person that's done a huge amount of work on this, and he's done some classes in AU. So I'll pop the link to his AU class, which I would highly encourage you, if you do want to go this track, really worth having a look at that. So I'll pop that into the chat, and we'll go from there. So thanks again for joining us today, and we appreciate you joining us for this webinar, and we look forward to meeting up in future and working through with some other elements. So please feel free to ask questions via the chat, and we'll try and answer those as well. So thanks again for joining us. Appreciate you coming and joining in on our webinar today.